Hello, I'm Shy Silverleaf and welcome to part 1 of this 4, possibly 5-part series teaching round split and flat join using these simple mitts. Now this part 1, will cover the materials that you need, your gauge swatch and gauge ring, and the measurements that you'll need to make this simple mitt that I have created to help you practice these 2 techniques along with me. Part 2 will cover the round split, which is going from working Tunisian in the round to working Tunisian flat without making 2 separate pieces and seaming them together. This is all one piece. Okay? Now the part 3 will cover the flat join, which is doing the opposite, working flat to working in the round again. Okay? In order to do this, you need to know at least how to do Tunisian Simple Stitch in both in the round and flat. I have used one stitch throughout these little mitts. If you do different stitches at different places, it'll give you a very interesting effect. But that's for a more advanced person. Part 4 and possibly 5 will be tips and tricks on how to do the round split and flat join in color work, at least 2 colors. Now, let's get started. Pardon me for just a moment. I'm a little cold, so I'm going to put on my favorite pair of gauntlets, which look like this. As you can see, I used the round split and the flat join to make these. The pattern will be available for sale as soon as I can get some additional measurements so I have more than just my size. Now, for the materials that you're going to need to make the mitts is, of course, yarn, 1 skein or 2, depends on your personal preference. I like to use 1, but no matter what, you're going to need 2 yarn ends that you're going to be working with. In the case of a single skein, I use the yarn from the center as well as the yarn from the outside as my 2 working yarns for working in the round. This particular yarn is a number 4 medium or worsted weight yarn. It's 100% acrylic. I believe it is Red Heart soft yarn in pink. I'm not 100% sure on that because I kind of lost the label. Oops. You'll also need a double-ended crochet hook. Okay, hook on both ends. The size that I'm using in my project is a J6mm. You will also need a stitch holder like what you would use in knitting. It absolutely has to be one that closes so that you, like in knitting, you do not lose any of your stitches as you're working. Very, very important. You will also need scissors for cutting tails, needles, yarn needles, plastic, metal, doesn't matter, I just prefer metal, for weaving in your tails when you're done, which I have not done yet. You're going to need a tape measure for, number 1, getting your gauge from your gauge swatch and gauge ring, as well as measuring your hand or whomever's hand the mitts are intended for. You will also need both slip stitch markers and locking stitch markers. Absolutely have to have both. And you will need pen and paper for jotting down notes as you go. Very, very important. Otherwise, by the time you get to your second mitt, you will have lost all your calculations, row counts, the whole spiel. Alright, to do this whole mitt, what you're going to need to do is you're going to actually need 2 things to get your gauge off of. Get that out of the way. You're going to need a gauge swatch and a gauge ring, which is just working in the round. Okay? Now you're going to need to do both of these in Tunisian Simple Stitch, both of them using the exact same hook. Okay? These absolutely have to match, otherwise when you do your mitt it's going to be all out of shape and do very funky things as you work it. You may need a little practice repeatedly doing these in order to get them the exact same gauge size. Alright, you're going to take your tape measure and measure right across your gauge swatch to get your stitches per inch. You do the exact same thing with your gauge ring and make sure that they match. Okay? If they match exactly, perfect. take a piece of paper, you're going to write down the number of stitches per inch that you got. I got 4. And then you're going to start taking some measurements. Whichever hand you want to do it on. I did it based off my largest hand, which I couldn't tell you which one is right now. Okay, take the tape measure. Now your finger base, as you see here, is what I call my knuckles. Right here where your fingers attach to your hand, because that's the very bottom of your fingers, or the base is what I call it. Take your tape measure, wrap it around, measure it, write it down in the blank. Now, to get the knit diameter, you're going to take your stitches per inch and multiply it by your finger base measurement, and that'll give you your approximate knit diameter. I ended up with 29 stitches at 4 stitches per inch. Okay. The next part that you're going to do is your rounds and rows per inch. You're going to take the tape measure, you're going to measure top to bottom and get your rows per inch on your swatch and your rounds per inch on your ring. Once again, these absolutely have to match. Okay? Write that down, and then you're going to take 3 measurements and end up with 4 figures. Okay? This is getting getting the length and the necessary section measurements of the entire mitt. The first one will be from start to thumb base. Now, what I mean by your thumb base is if you turn your hand sideways and look at it with your thumb directly in line with your fingers, you'll see there's a little bone right here at the bottom of your thumb that sticks out. See? Absolutely right there. If I move my thumb away, it disappears. See? There it is. There it goes. There it is. There it goes. That's the thumb base that I'm talking about. And you're going to measure from there to wherever you want it to start. Okay? And you're going to write that down in the first line. The next one is your thumb base to your top webbing. Top webbing is looking at your hand again. Okay, stretch out your thumb, and between your thumb and your forefinger is this little flap of skin. This is the top webbing that I'm talking about, is right here. Okay? I like to do this on the inside of my hand and just measure. This can get a little awkward, so you may need some help. And measure exactly where you need to be. Okay? Write that down, thumb base to top webbing. This measurement, we'll cover that in a minute. Okay? Then you're going to do from the top webbing to where you want it to end. I made it end just below my finger base, right here. Okay? Put that figure here. Then you're going to take the start to thumb base figure, thumb base to top webbing figure, and top webbing to ending figure. Add those 3 together to give you the total length of the mitt. Okay? Now your start to thumb base is this first section working in the round. Okay? Thumb base to top webbing is where your thumb hole is. And then of course top webbing to ending is the last working in the round. And total length is total length. Self-explanatory. Now you're going to need to next is take your, there we go, rounds and rows per inch and multiply it by each one of these 4 figures to give you the approximate number of rows and rounds in each section and overall. Now keep in mind that all 5 of these figures are just jumping off points. The mitt diameter and all 4 of these down here. As you go along, you may find that you need to readjust them. Make sure that you have pen at the ready and taking plenty of notes as you go, so that by the time you're ready to make the second one, you'll already have the number of rows, rounds, stitches, and the whole enchilada worked out, and it'll be a whole lot easier. Alright, on to the actual method. Thanks for watching part 1 of this series. Coming up next is part 2 covering the round split. This is Shy Silverleaf, and I'll see you later with Hook at the Ready.